All right, it's time for the review of The Horseman, my take on the story from Chuck Dixon and illustration by Joe Bennett. So first things first, should you get the book? Yes or no? The answer is an absolute yes. This is a great book. This is I just got reminded, it's a one-shot book from Chuck Dixon. It was not what I expected. And that's good and bad in a sense, at least for me. I had a pre-Horseman video put out previously, and my expectation for Horseman was just complete mayhem. I thought this guy was just out for blood, wanted to kill people, mercenary, possibly psycho. That was not the case here. And I think, so in a sense, not what I expected, but good in a sense because it gave time for, especially this one-shot type of comic book coming out from Chuck Dixon, to let us figure out and understand the type of character Hector Caballero is, his motive on why he's doing what he's doing. But there's still more to the guy. There's still more to who he is. And you kind of get a sense of that in the book. But all the previews of this character was just fighting, killing, and this whole back and forth with the boss man, Tuna. And so you just kind of got that sense of this is just going to be war of gangs and single vigilante, right? We did get a bit of that. Actually, quite a bit. A few occasions of where the Horseman is showing what he can do and why he's taking care of business. But then we also get to see the other side of him, the real or normal person that he is. And it's amazing. What I like about this book is all the way from Isom to what we recently got with Gooding, but all the way to Yara, all the characters with the exec powers, they were at this certain level of just power upon power, right? These people with extraordinary abilities, right? Gooding, we know that he was a normal person, but he relied on his technology. So that the technology kind of made him a little bit of a superhuman in a sense, right? Kind of like that Iron Man type of character, right? So he has the money and the ability to be that type of person. For Hector, it's just him and his physical skills. He's a normal person or normie. I forget, they talk about how he in the book where he's just a normal person. But that level of exit power we had throughout the many books prior to the Horseman, it's now we're looking at a level below that where there's just normal people, normal families, and on that ground level where the gangs are at. But if you expected it, Blitz and Sturm, they have extra abilities. We kind of, I'm sure many of us knew that they had some sort of abilities. They weren't just mercenaries for hire, right? So you'll see a little bit of that. So we take that level of story down a bit, and it's just normal. That's why I said it was good and bad in terms of how I expected this book to be. It wasn't just complete fighting. It was getting to know the character. Not only that, getting to know how Florespark really is. There is corruption upon corruption all over the place. And it's crazy that Chuck gave us a sense of that a little bit in Alpha Core, right? There's a little bit more of that here on a different type of level. Not a different type of level, just a different type of case or environment. So that builds upon Florespark and the influences and hierarchy, I guess you could call it, of all these gangs and business people and leaders, mobsters. So that's building up, right? So it's great because that was the whole plan from the beginning that Eric July put into place, where he's going to build that comic book universe. And that is slowly becoming the case. And we see a lot of that definitely in the writing from Chuck Dixon. And I think he touched upon that from his previous interviews. That's what he's trying to do. And it's working. It's great. So this comic book being a one shot, it definitely fit the one shot type of, at least in my mind, the one shot type of comic book where you get a sense of who this person is. There's a complete cutoff at the end where it's like a complete story, right? If this was a single book and this is only going to be that one book, this is a good cutoff at the end. So I appreciated that. So this made me think that, yeah, this is a good one-shot type of book. We got to know Horseman a lot more, and it wasn't rushed in a sense of, those books where you go from timeline to timeline back and forth. It wasn't those type of books here. Just a good, clean story from start to finish, and I appreciated that. So let me go back to these characters a bit. Tuna, great mobster. I like the dialogue. You can tell by the way he presents himself, his demeanor, his dialogue. He was a man that you don't want to mess with, right? Sturm and Blitz, I kind of got you couldn't really tell who was which before the book. So Blitz is the girl or the female. Sturm is the guy. So they have accept abilities, and I appreciate that in the book. It was kind of expected anyway. So I'm going to say that they do have abilities, and it was interesting when we got to see that. So they're good characters. I'm pretty sure we're going to see more of them. But also going back to this whole level of bringing it down level to normal people. And then there's this level of going back to the exes, right? So there's the Horseman, then there's Sturm and Blitz that comes into play. And in the book, there's that back and forth level of these characters coming to the book. You could tell there was just such, how can I explain it? You could tell that there is a level of who you are in that world, right? A Horseman, Hector, he was good, but he knew where his lane was in terms of his abilities, right? He knew he doesn't have any X abilities. He knows of the people who have X abilities and what they can do. You see other characters come in, right? So I don't want to spoil that too much, but the whole set of X people came in, and you could tell like this was like the top. So like there's the Horseman, there's Sturm and Blitz, and then there's other X people, and it's like I like that dynamic, right? Because then you could tell the levels of normal people to people with a high ability, and when those other people came into play, like you knew that okay, we knew that they had powers. Now you know that they're powerful compared to other X. So I like that. That's why it was great to see that happen. So you can get to understand the dynamics that's going on in the Rippaverse world in terms of these people in play. But yeah, it was a great book overall. I liked it. It was a good one shot. I do want to see more of the Horseman. I don't know how, and you'll understand from the end of the book, I don't know how he is going to come back to the comics. And you'll understand why if you haven't read the book. So I do want more of the Horseman. How he comes back to the play, I don't know. And I'm very curious about these one-shots. So if there's the Horseman, one shot, welcome to Florespark. When the new Horseman comes out, is that a Horseman number 1? I mean, a Horseman number 2? Or do we now start the Horseman number 1 series and then keep going to 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th? I don't know. But that's one thing I'm curious about how these books are going to continue. Because I do know that the Rippaverse and Eric in July, they do want to keep a good timeline so that no one's confused on where the books are. And so that numbering of the comic book kind of matters. So we'll see how that goes. Many of these books are just the start of the solo comic book stories for Yaira, Alpha Core, Isom, and then Bloodwood coming up next. So those are all the good things I like. If I could share also a little bit more of what I did not like, there was a little bit, but on my first read, the one thing that did caught my eye was a little bit somewhere in the dialogue. So this is a little bit of a spoiler. So if you want to stop the video here, you can. But every time there's an action or fight that Horseman goes out to do in his uniform, mostly from what I can tell, he always gives an after action report, and there's a numbering, right? There's number 147 from the beginning, right from the very beginning. You can see at the top, after action report 147. Then when it gets towards the time he's doing like 3 other missions all at once. Well, I don't know if all at once, but one after the other. There's an after actions reports 150 to 152, right? So those are the 3 missions. And so after that, after action 150 to 152, the next thing he does and goes to the warehouse, and this is what we see in the trailer, that is after action report number 152. So I think there's a little numbering error there. That That's the first thing I noticed because of course I'm reading a dialogue. So there's a little misnumbering there, I think. If you guys figure something out, that's not the case, please let me know in the comments. So that's one. The second thing is I do appreciate Joe Bennett's artwork, where he takes all these very large panels and puts them between two pages. And so this one here with Horseman coming over that rocket launcher, that's a good panel preview right before the book came out. And when we see that in the book, it looks like that, right? So you kind of still get to see that artwork in its true form, its entirety, but because of the pages of the book, you get that little cutoff right in the middle. So so obviously the panel here is a lot better. It's a good view. However, there was one that was a bit of a cutoff that didn't look so well. So, and that's with this panel here. So this scene in the book is a very important one, I feel like, because it gave us a taste of what these two are capable of. And the way it's presented in the page, it's cut off by the head. So if you look at that closely here, you can see the cut off by the head. So it kind of throws it off when you try to read and take in the visual. I don't know, just slightly looks off. There was other large panels that there's a cutoff because of the two pages, and they were okay, but that one was, I think, maybe the worst of them. So that's one thing I think could be improved on for trying to fit the art in the book so that it's readable, it's presented in a way that you still get the same effect. Because this scene right here, this panel right here is a good important scene, talking about, you know, Blitz and Sturm giving a report to Tuna of what just happened, what they just did, and that was good. And many of the there's some parts in this book where it's open for interpretation, just like the fighting. Because the fight scenes I wish was a lot longer, obviously, because, you know, with the action previews in the trailer, you just expected to see more. I just wish they were longer or just more of them. But you know, you can only fit so much in one book. But there's many scenes or panels in the book where there's the end fight scene or the end scene of whatever fight happened, and that was it. And you just had to. It was open for interpretation of how you would have taken that fight to have happened. So overall, good book. Should you get it? Yes, like I said, I still think the Alpha Core was the best book that Chuck Dixon put out. But this is definitely a second right after, in my opinion, in terms of the overall of all the books that have been put out so far. I have high expectations for the next book coming out, Bloodruth, and that's a whole different genre that's being written by the Saska sisters. So I'm looking forward to that. So Horseman, if you haven't gotten it, get it. Definitely a book that you need to have in your collection if you're a Rippaverse fan, and definitely a story you need to get to know of to not only figure out what the Horseman is, but also Florespark, the hierarchy and dynamics of gangs and organizations and mobsters in Florespark, and just to understand, like, Florespark is not just really a nice, happy-go-lucky place to be in. There's a lot of corruption, at least from what I can tell. And I think we're going to see more of that, especially when we see a lot more street-level stories coming from ISOM and Horseman in the future, and even Gooding. But yeah, so far, a lot of the stuff is just focused in on Florespark, but I love it. All right, so don't forget to like, follow, comment, and I'll see you in the next video.